The Thalmor. Proof that being tall, rich, and magical doesn't make you likable. They've banned the worship of Talos, instigated a civil war in Skyrim, and managed to make just about everyone in Tamriel hate them. But hey, don't worry, they're not tyrants, they're just enlightened. After all, free will is overrated. Just let the tall banana man tell you what to do. So, how did this group of narcissists claw their way to the top? And what's their endgame? Today we're going to answer those questions, debunk a common fan theory, and talk at length about some fantasy politics. I'm Shade, and here's everything you'd ever want to know about the Thalmor. To understand the Thalmor and their rise to power, we first have to understand their ideology, a belief in Elven supremacy that stretches back to the foundations of Tamriel's history. This belief isn't simply about cultural pride or political dominance, it's rooted in the elves' interpretation of creation itself. So let's go back, way back. In the beginning, the world was formed from the interplay of Anu, the embodiment of stasis, and Padme, the force of change. From their union emerged the Aedra, gods who sacrificed parts of themselves to create Mundus, the mortal realm. But to the elves, this act of creation was seen as catastrophic loss. To them, the Aedra were betrayed by Lorkhan into giving up their divine essence, trapping their offspring, Mer and men alike, in an imperfect mortal existence. The Altmer believe that their connection to the divine is stronger than that of men, seeing themselves as the direct descendants of the Aedra. More hardline believers view themselves as the rightful inheritors of godhood, desiring to transcend the mortal plane and reclaim their place in Aetherius. This belief fuels a sense of superiority over men who mostly embrace their mortality, seeing it as a gift from Lorkhan. The Altmer's rigid beliefs are also reflected in the culture of the Somerset Isles. The Isles value tradition, purity, and intellect. The Somerset Isles also operate under a system of rigid social castes, with those who are seen as the wisest, such as teachers and priests, at the top, and dumbasses at the bottom. So, tying it all together, the Thalmor believe that the Altmer are superior to all other races, and should take their rightful place as the ruler of Tamriel. So, where did the Thalmor as an organization come from? Let's move to the Middle Merethic era. Around this time period, the Altmer spread out from their home in the Somerset Isles. Those who left would eventually become the different races of elves we see in Tamriel, changing over time to suit their new homes. One such group was the Ayleids. Centered in Cyrodiil, this kingdom of elves would come to rule over the Needs in the First Era. While at first, some of the Ayleids worshipped the Aedra and treated their human subjects fairly, eventually a schism arose, and the Aedra-worshipping Ayleids were kicked off the island, Survivor style. With all compassion thrown out the window, the remaining Ayleids were mostly tyrannical weirdos that subjected their human slaves to all manner of horrors in the name of their Daedric masters, from ritual sacrifices to flaying people alive and creating art from their corpses. I can't imagine why the humans hated them. But a certain human would soon start an uprising against her elven masters. This was Alessia, slave queen. She prayed to the divines and gained their favor. Then her crew of demigods whooped the Ayleids' asses so hard that no one ever heard from them again. From the ashes of the Ayleid Empire, Alessia kick-started the first human empire in Cyrodiil. The time of elven rule had passed. Now let's jump forward a little further down the line. In the Second Era, the Altmer were still kinda mad about the whole not ruling the world thing, and the empire was in a state of disarray due to not having any clear ruler in Cyrodiil. With the goal to take hold of this vacuum of power, the Thalmor as an organization was reborn. Thanks to a little help from the Altmer's new queen, Erin, the Thalmor were expanded from a minor government organization focused mainly on preserving elven heritage into a militarized powerhouse representing the supremacy of elven rule. Now let me take the time to discuss a theory about Thalmor ideology. A fan theory that I keep seeing is that the Thalmor's ultimate goal is to destroy Nirn, to return Mundus back to the nothingness of the void so that their souls might ascend to Aetherius or something. And I'm going to go ahead and ask people to stop trying to make the Thalmor cooler. They're unapologetic elf supremacists. Isn't that enough? Why do we have to make them have some sort of insane ideology involving destroying the towers? There's absolutely no basis for this theory in the lore whatsoever. The idea came from a vague post from a former Bethesda writer, but it's simply not supported by anything Bethesda has ever officially written. They're not that good at writing, guys. Now where was I? The Bosmer and Khajiit petitioned the Thalmor for aid due to a civil war and a plague, respectively. And I can only assume that the Thalmor simply said, well, at least they aren't human, and formed an alliance with them. They also helped quell the Black Sap Revolution in Valenwood, and helped stop the Nahaden flu and elsewhere. And since the Altmer now had allies outside of the Somerset Isles, the first Aldmeri Dominion was born. an empire ruled by elves, and Khajiit. The Thalmor's first try for the Ruby Throne came shortly after, during the Alliance War. With Cyrodiil having no clear leader, 3 different factions warred for control of the Imperial City. The Aldmeri Dominion, the Daggerfall Covenant, and the Ebonheart Pact all fought over the scraps of the now disorganized empire. And then no one really knows what happened after that, but eventually all 3 factions gave up, and the first Aldmeri Dominion was dissolved. The year is Second Era 830, approximately 200 years after the dissolution of the First Dominion, and the Thalmor are invading Valenwood. Due to the heirs of the throne all squabbling, and thanks to some vague treaty from about 3,000 years ago, the Thalmor were able to legally justify their invasion. The treaty claimed a potential heir to the throne of Valenwood's great-great-granddaddy agreed to their aid. Meanwhile, the now fractured empire couldn't stop them, and so they took control of Valenwood. And since people in the Elder Scrolls really like counting, especially when power gets shifted around and new empires are born, the Aldmeri Dominion was reformed as, the Second Aldmeri Dominion. The Thalmor took control of Valenwood, acting mainly as a law-keeping force, and keeping the Altmer from having to worry about pirate attacks, actually. But the second wave of the Thalmor would quickly come to an end when Tiber Septim took Valenwood under the banner of his empire, and then he used a giant robot to conquer the Somerset Isles themselves, handing another L to the elves once again. This was the start of the Third Empire, and the first Tamriel-wide human-led empire that would last for the next 4 centuries. Okay, now that 4 centuries have been glossed over, we arrive at the third iteration of the Thalmor, the very same organization we see in Skyrim. After the events of the Oblivion Crisis, the now mostly forgotten Thalmor seized their opportunity for power, gaining popularity for defending their homeland from the Daedric invasion. And since the Empire wasn't really in a position to dispute it, the Thalmor took complete control over the Somerset Isles, renaming the country Alinor after its capital city. And 7 years after that, they backed a coup in Valenwood, creating another goddamn Aldmeri Dominion. Then, complete silence. The Aldmeri Dominion cut all ties to the Empire, and for 70 years rumors flew of civil unrest in Alinor. Then suddenly the moons disappeared, and the Void Nights began. This was especially devastating to the Khajiit, whose birth cycles depend on the moon phases. For 2 years, the people of Tamriel speculated where Master and Secunda had gone, but don't worry, the Thalmor were there to take credit when they reappeared. And for some reason it worked. The Khajiit were grateful to the Dominion for the restoration of the moons, and as a result, Elsewhere eventually became part of the Dominion. As the Third Aldmeri Dominion grew, tensions increased between it and the Empire, now reformed under Titus Mede II, culminating in the Thalmor invading Hammerfell and Cyrodiil. This began the start of the Great War. The Thalmor began pushing deeper into Cyrodiil, and even conquered the Imperial City itself, but they didn't get old Titus, as he had retreated to the safety of his reinforcements in Skyrim, sacrificing a whole legion to do so. The following year, Titus Mede launched his counterattack, taking back the Imperial City in the Battle of the Red Ring, but the cost of the war were great on both sides, so the Imperials signed the most one-sided peace treaty ever made, agreeing to cede parts of southern Hammerfell to the Thalmor, and agreeing to renounce the worship of the god of man, Talos, perhaps signifying a spiritual victory for the Thalmor, but the full ramifications of the White Gold Concordant were still yet to unfold. Hammerfell resisted the terms of the Concordant, going to war with the Thalmor, and even managed to gain independence. However, despite this victory, the drain on the Imperial forces had taken hold, so the Empire settled into an uneasy peace with the Thalmor. But as Skyrim underwent a civil war, the Thalmor became only allies to the Empire in name, secretly supporting the Stormcloak Rebellion as a way to drain the Empire's resources. Ulfric or Tullius, which is your favorite crush? Will you go with the racists or the racists? And this brings us to today, where we sit as the events of Skyrim. Will the Thalmor be defeated once and for all, or will Elven supremacy reign over a new dominion? Find out next time Bethesda releases a new goddamn game. That just about does it for the history of the Thalmor. Thank you for watching. Once again, my name is Shade, and let me know in the comments who your favorite racist of Tamriel is. And as always, stay curious.